Hello, my friends. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Once you do hop in live, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you can hear me or comment. Today is going to be about the roller coaster effect that a lot of new, especially solo practitioners, run into as they start a cash practice, work really, really hard to get relationships built and do different forms of marketing, get patients in the door, and then all of a sudden they get so busy that they're unable to do the things that got them busy in the first place. And now, before I kind of talk about that and how to avoid that from happening to you, because if you don't do something to avoid it, and you're busting your butt to fill your schedule, over time it probably will fill up and you will get in this situation. And then all of a sudden, when that schedule drops off, it's really freaking scary because you're like, man, I'm back to a half full schedule. What happened? And I'll tell you what happened. And how to avoid it here in a moment. But this comes about because in my coaching call today with my mastermind group, one of my longer term members had announced that she had booked 6 new patients this past week, which for a solo practice is pretty big. And if you do that a few weeks in a row, you're going to have a pretty darn full schedule. And so after really celebrating this win, I said, all right, now we really need to put some things in place and start doing some things so that you can avoid this roller coaster effect that I just described. But as kind of a full circle moment or story with her, it was really great because it was about maybe 6 months ago that she reached out to me privately and said, look, I'm really concerned because I've been working at this for a while now, and I feel like I'm doing all the right things, and I'm just not seeing the big results. Patients are trickling in, but I'm still seeing nowhere near the amount of patients that I need or want to see. And so we kind of did our checklist of what is she working on? You're doing this, you're following up correctly. She's focusing on this form of marketing, that form of marketing. It's like, okay, you know what? You're doing everything you need to be doing. This is going to pay off. There are a lot of factors, many are out of our control that that have an effect on how quickly new practices fill up with cash pay patients. And I've seen practices that were super busy in just the first month or two, and I've seen some that took 2 or 3 months. And not that those, I'm sorry, 2 or 3 years. And it's not that those who took longer were doing things necessarily wrong. Sometimes they were, but sometimes it seemed like they were doing everything right. And it just took longer for various reasons, some probably unknown and unexplained. So one side note that I tell everyone is, as much as possible, if you can have some sort of runway, some savings, a line of credit, something to kind of get you through times that may, if it is a slower start for you than expected, that you're not freaking out like my mastermind member was. But she took my advice, and I told her the analogy of the flywheel, which is a great analogy that you find uh, in this book and other. It's not just specific to this book, but this one, Good to Great, is a fantastic book. I recommend everybody check it out. It's by Jim Collins. And the flywheel analogy is, back in the day when they used to do like manual ground like grains and mills, they would have these huge circular rocks called a flywheel, and they would push and push and push and get it going. Sometimes they, if they were smarter, had the ability to let water help them out. But essentially, the idea is that there's a ton of inertia in something of this size. So to get it started, it takes a lot of pushing, a lot of effort to get very, very little movement. But if you're consistent, and you consistently working hard to pushing in the right direction, then over time it builds up that momentum. It builds and builds and builds until finally it takes very little effort, very little input in order to keep a massive amount of energy production. And this thing is continuing to turn over and over. And so that is an analogy that Jim Collins had used for well-designed businesses, that it's going to be a lot of effort up front, but if you push, the right systems in place, right staff in place, that with minimal business owner effort over time, then things are really rolling without as much of your input and your energy, which is a beautiful thing. And I would say there's a little caveat to that. I don't think that's a perfect analogy for the small solo practice or even a multi therapist practice in its first few years. I think that what we see a lot is this roller coaster effect. So today, what I wanted to teach more about, in order to avoid that roller coaster effect and make it truly more like a flywheel instead of it just kind of, you're busy, then you're slow, you're busy, then you're slow. There are some key things to do ahead of time, because once you're already super busy with patient care, then it's not too late to go back and do these things. You have to, but you probably are going to be stretched thin and really, really tired, and it's going to be difficult to implement these things when you're already seeing 30 plus patients, or 30 hours of patients a week. So first and foremost is, and this is what I told my member, I said, as you are, ramping up with your schedule, I want you to immediately start to ask yourself, what components of the marketing, the networking, the different strategies I've used that I'm seeing pay off now, what components of those can I take off my plate and train someone else to do, already? Just getting it off your plate, paying someone $15 to $20, an hour to allow you to do more $150 hour work. It's an amazing ROI, and for young business owners who are not necessarily coming from entrepreneurial families that have had a lot of staff or anything like that in the past, it's scary to think to outsource and pay someone else to do something that, hey, but I can do that. Well, but you don't need to be working on that. You need to be freeing up time so you can avoid this roller coaster effect, because your time is much better spent on other things that no one else can do, like patient care and like certain components of marketing. So in her case, she was doing a lot of networking in person, networking and relationship building, and was doing a great job at that, following up, not just going once and then trying to get a coffee afterwards and that's it, but multiple touch points, really building those relationships that are now finally paying off for her. And so I said, what components of those kinds of things could you do? If you're going to a networking group or a networking event, you're collecting, business cards, and as I instruct, you're hopping over into the bathroom now and again to write on the back of them a little something personal that you talked about with that person that you could mention in the follow-up email to let them know that you were really listening, that you cared to listen. So writing those things down, but the next day, maybe you're handing those to your admin assistant. You have a nice templated email that you send out that they can add in your notes, formulate those emails, send them for you, then add that person and that interaction to your lead tracking or your networking tracking spreadsheet. We have a spreadsheet that we use at my office that I have as a resource to my mastermind members, where essentially it's a Google sheet, and you can put in your line item, the people you've met, and on the columns you're putting each touch point. And what's cool, and you can look this up and do it yourself, you don't have to be a mastermind member to access this. There's an add-on, I can't remember the name of it, but an add-on to the Google sheet that will allow you to set reminders on a specific date. They'll email you and say, hey, it's time to follow up with so-and-so. You can even put notes in there and say, like, for this follow-up, it would be good to maybe find an article that's associated with their industry and say, hey, this just came across my timeline and made me think of you. How you doing? Want to get together? So those are the kinds of like personal touches that you can add and track and get reminders on, so that those touch points continue to happen. So you actually, go from someone who isn't going to send you business when you just met them at a networker and maybe got a coffee, but after 6 months of developing a relationship and maybe seeing them a few times in that period, now they're ready to do business. Now they're a great referral source. So those little things and those components of that overall strategy that can be taken off your plate and given to someone else, so important to do that before you get too busy to deal with it. Some other things to think about too is that, like I said, this flywheel analogy is not always the most accurate for some solo practice, small cash practices that I see in the beginning. And the reason is that most of the time, if you're doing it right, you're either really hitting the nail on the head with one form of marketing, and let's say you've got awesome word of mouth going, or let's say you're killing it in content marketing, or let's say you're great with networking and relationship building, but you don't have enough time to do all those things, to have all those irons in the fire. And in my Cash Practice Freedom e-course, I teach about my 3-pronged approach to cash practice marketing, because you want eventually to have all 3 of those irons in the fire: the in-person, relationship building, presentations, workshop, but the face-to-face stuff, the digital marketing, everything online, content marketing, Facebook, social media, all the, all that stuff. And then just maximizing your word of mouth, including online, reviews on Google, Yelp, etc. So if you're really, hitting the nail on the head on any one of those early on, it's hard to do it all for all of them and see patients. It's basically impossible. But when you get to a point where maybe one of those flywheels is going, one of those irons is getting really hot, maybe it's time for you to start considering adding another iron to the fire. So maybe like her in this situation today with my mastermind member, maybe she's kicking butt on the networking. She's going to keep that going, but she outsources some components of it and frees up her time to look at, well, what could we do for content marketing? Could I start a digital marketing strategy now? And very important question, how much of that can I get someone else to do for me? Can I find another person for $15 an hour? Or maybe if you're willing to go outside the US borders, maybe you can find someone for $5 an hour. But what can I outsource? Can I grab my phone and have my free, recording app? And as I'm driving to and from the clinic, I am recording my thoughts on, pelvic health or tennis elbow or any of the things that you might be treating in your niche, and literally just handing that audio recording over to someone, get it transcribed on SpeechPad or Tell Me, I think it is tellme.com, for less than $1 per minute of transcription. Have your assistant turn that into a blog post. Heck, you could even turn the whole thing into a podcast if you wanted. There's so many things that you could do and outsource when it comes to content marketing to make sure that you're having to put in minimal effort to end up with like a nice SEO rich blog post. Or let's say it's video, throw the video up, do a 5-minute video, same thing. They're transcribing it. They're making a blog post. They're putting it on Facebook. They're putting it on YouTube. They're embedding the YouTube video back to your blog post. All these things are backlinking to that specific page. You're sending it out via email. Every step of that way after you've recorded it is totally outsourceable to someone else. And so those are the kinds of things that you can add a new iron to your marketing fire, right? But you're not having to put all the effort in that, because then you're just, you're going to end up in that same situation of not having enough time, especially as things ramp up in the clinic for you. And then finally, the last thing I would suggest, so those are the first two. The last I would say would be considering adding in another therapist, a treating staff member, before you really want to, right? Before your schedule is too busy, is as busy as you ultimately want it to be, right? So let's say you go into it thinking, I think it'd be great if I was seeing 30 hours of patients a week. Well, when you're at 20, maybe you start the search of, or less, start to network, start to find, good potential candidates. You can go to automatedhiring.com and use that system that I created to set up like an automated filtering system, getting people to come through, and then you have candidates ready to go when you're really ready to pull the trigger and hire someone. But the idea here is that I think that most new practice owners that do want to expand beyond a solo practice and don't want to deal with this yo-yo and constantly, all the revenue of the practice be dependent on them there paying, seeing patients. I think most will wait too long to hire. My preference for a business owner that wants to ultimately still see 30 hours of patients a week, that when they're at 20 hours, they're already trying to hire someone else. And they're trying to get some of their patients on the other person, some of the new patients onto the other person's. And pretty soon, you've got them seeing 20 and you're seeing 20. Now you're at positive 10, and that last 10 that would have made you feel completely booked and overwhelmed and no time to do any of this marketing or training or any of the systems creations that you need to be doing in your business, you still have that time. So I would err towards, hiring a little sooner, as opposed to waiting until you're already so busy. Because, I've been in the situation in the past myself, but so often with business owners, and, if you're a business owner and this rings true to you, like, give it a thumbs up, because getting to that point of overwhelm when you're like, I really need help, you're like, I don't even have time to train this person to give me the help that I need help with, So it really is important that we kind of step back and see where things are headed and try to pre-plan a little bit. And even at the little bit of like scary risk of, okay, I'm going to start paying them to see patients before I'm full of myself and before I'm quite ready for that, just, This is how businesses are built, with systems and staffing in place to avoid this gut-wrenching roller coaster effect as you're getting rolling in your new practice. So those were some of my kind of highlights of what I see happen very, very often with young practice owners, young business owners as a whole, that are in any kind of a B2B or B2C service industry, where you get too busy to keep doing the things that got you busy, and then for years you're doing this really stressful roller coaster thing. And if you just pre-plan, get some things off your plate, maybe hire treating PT staff, or clinical staff earlier than you might initially want to, and then in an outsourced or staff-based way, add new marketing irons to your fire along the way. Then you're going to have more of a true flywheel analogy in your practice of it kind of going steady, steady, up, up, and you're having to put in less and less of your own effort than what we typically see with the roller coaster effect. So with all that said, if you enjoyed any of this information, please do give at least a thumbs up. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. I'm happy to come back and answer anything after the fact for those who are watching the replay. Thank you, as always, for joining me. We're doing this every Tuesday afternoon, at some point in the afternoon after I finish my mastermind coaching calls. And that group, if you're interested in checking out the details there, it's drjarodcarter.com/mastermind. You can see the different levels of the mastermind and all that my students receive from me and the others in that incredibly supportive group. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.